The following tale is plucked from the pages of a nameless tome, a manuscript whispered of in hushed tones by those who dare tread too close to the edge of sanity. It is said that merely speaking of the events you are about to hear invites danger beyond reckoning. For these are the deeds and misdeeds of souls whose fates were sealed the moment they crossed into shadowed realms where darkness reigns eternal. Be warned, listener, do not repeat what you hear to others. Do not commit these words to memory, nor linger on the images conjured within your mind. To do so is to risk incurring the wrath of, well, perhaps it is best if I leave the name unspoken. Even now, it claws at the corners of my mind. Know this, should you choose to continue, you do so at your own peril. And remember, you have been warned. This tale is called The Midnight Auction. Malcolm sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, the flickering glow of a single candle casting eerie shadows across the walls. The invitation lay on the table in front of him, an ornate black envelope sealed with a wax stamp. He hesitated, his hand hovering over it, before finally tearing it open. Inside was a small card, elegant and understated. You are cordially invited to the midnight auction. One night only. Location will be revealed at the appointed hour. His heart pounded as he read the words. He had heard rumors of the midnight auction, whispered tales of forbidden items, cursed relics, and desperate souls. Some said it was just an urban legend, but the invitation in his hand proved otherwise. For Malcolm, this was more than just a curiosity, it was a chance, a sliver of hope to bring back what he had lost. He glanced over at the photograph of his late wife, Anna, her eyes warm and kind, her smile full of life. She had been taken from him too soon, a cruel twist of fate that left him hollow and broken. The idea of seeing her again, of speaking to her one last time, was a temptation he could not resist. And so, he would go, no matter the cost. As the clock struck midnight, Malcolm felt a strange pull, a compulsion that guided him to a street corner he had never noticed before. There, a black carriage awaited, its driver hidden beneath a dark hood. Without a word, Malcolm stepped inside, and the carriage began to move, the world outside blurring into a dark, swirling mist. He had no idea where he was going but knew there was no turning back. The carriage came to a stop in front of an ancient mansion, its towering spires reaching up into the starless sky. The building seemed to pulse with a dark energy, its windows glowing faintly as if lit from within by some unseen force. Malcolm stepped out, his breath catching in his throat as he took in the sight. This was it. The place where the midnight auction would take place. He approached the heavy wooden doors, which creaked open on their own, revealing a grand hall bathed in shadows. The room was filled with masked figures, each one dressed in elegant, dark attire. Malcolm could feel their eyes on him, watching, judging, but no one spoke. The only sound was the low, steady hum of voices coming from somewhere deep within the mansion. A figure approached him, dressed in a black suit with a mask that resembled a raven's beak. "Welcome, sir," the figure said, bowing slightly. "You are just in time. The auction will begin shortly." Malcolm nodded, following the figure down a long corridor that twisted and turned, the path seeming to shift beneath his feet. It was as if the mansion itself was alive, guiding him deeper into its labyrinthine interior. Finally, they arrived at a room filled with artifacts displayed on velvet cushions, each one more strange and unsettling than the last. There were ancient scrolls covered in indecipherable runes, amulets that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat, and mirrors that reflected not the room but some dark, distant place. But one item caught Malcolm's eye, a small, ornate mirror, its frame adorned with intricate carvings. It seemed to glow with a faint, ethereal light, and as he stared at its surface, he thought he could see a shadowy figure moving within. "That," said the auctioneer, a tall, gaunt man dressed in black, "is our most coveted item tonight. The Mirror of Darnath. It allows one to see and speak to the dead, for a price." Malcolm's heart skipped a beat. What kind of price? The auctioneer smiled, his eyes cold and distant. It does not require money, but a trade, a piece of one's soul. The room fell silent as the auction began. Malcolm's eyes were fixed on the mirror, his mind racing. Could this really be the answer? Could it bring him closer to Anna? He clenched his fists, feeling the weight of his decision pressing down on him. Others began to bid, offering pieces of their wealth, their power, and even their memories. But none of them were willing to give up what the mirror truly demanded. Malcolm's heart pounded as he realized that this was his chance. If he wanted the mirror, he would have to offer something more. "I will give it a piece of my soul," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. The other guests turned to him, their masked faces expressionless, but he could feel their shock, their disdain. The auctioneer's smile widened. "Very well," he said. "The mirror of Dartmouth is yours." Malcolm felt a chill crawl down his spine as he stepped forward to claim the mirror. The mirror seemed to pulse in his hands, its surface rippling like water. He could see his reflection staring back at him, but something was wrong. His eyes looked darker, emptier, as if a part of him had been drained away. But he didn't care. All that mattered was the chance to see her again. The auction continued, but Malcolm paid no attention. He clutched the mirror tightly, his mind consumed by the possibilities. He barely noticed as the room began to twist and warp around him, the walls stretching and bending, the shadows growing longer and darker. It was as if the mansion was feeding off his desperation, his longing. And then, he heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible but unmistakably familiar. "Malcolm." Malcolm's head snapped up, his eyes wide as he searched for the source of the voice. "Anna," he whispered, his hands trembling as he held the mirror up to his face. The reflection stared back at him, but it was no longer his own. It was her, Anna, her eyes dark and distant, her expression twisted with pain. "Malcolm," she said, her voice echoing through the room. "Why did you bring me back?" Tears welled up in Malcolm's eyes as he reached out, his fingers brushing against the cold glass. "I had to. I couldn't let you go. I need you." The reflection's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Malcolm thought he saw something else lurking behind them, something dark and sinister. "This isn't what you think," she said, her voice cold and hollow. "The mirror doesn't just let you see the dead, it's a doorway." "A doorway to what?" Malcolm asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The shadows in the room began to shift, creeping closer, wrapping around his legs and arms like tendrils. "To something much worse," Anna said, her voice now a low, guttural growl. "You didn't bring me back, Malcolm. You brought them." The room around him twisted and warped, the walls stretching and bending as if trying to swallow him whole. Malcolm felt a cold, creeping sensation wash over him, and he realized too late that he was not alone. Dark, shadowy figures stepped out from the corners of the room, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light, their faces twisted into grotesque, mocking smiles. Malcolm stumbled back, his heart pounding as the shadows closed in around him. "No, this isn't real. It can't be." "But it is," the reflection whispered, the voice distorted. "You offered a piece of your soul, Malcolm. And now, the mansion will take it." The shadows in the mirror surged forward, and Malcolm felt a cold, sharp pain in his chest as if something was being ripped out of him. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. The mist wrapped around him, pulling him closer to the mirror until his face was pressed against the glass. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the room, calm and collected. "The mansion's debt must be paid, one way or another. This is the price of desire, and despair." As the mist tightened its grip, Malcolm's vision began to blur. The room around him twisted, the walls melting into shadows. He could feel the life being drained from him, a cold, suffocating emptiness filling his chest. The reflection in the mirror changed, morphing into a twisted, skeletal version of himself, its eyes glowing with a sickly green light. "You wanted to see her," the reflection said, its voice now a chorus of whispers. Now, you will join her. Malcolm's knees buckled, and he collapsed, his hand reaching out in a final, futile attempt to escape. The shadows closed in, swallowing him whole, and the last thing he saw was the reflection's grin, wide and cruel, as it dragged him into the darkness. The auctioneer stepped forward, his eyes glinting as he observed the mirror. The glass was smooth once more, the mist dissipating, leaving only the reflection of the empty room. The guests, still masked, began to disperse, their movements slow and deliberate as if nothing unusual had happened. The auction was over, and the mansion had claimed another soul. But as the last of the guests disappeared into the labyrinthine halls, the mirror flickered. For a brief moment, Malcolm's face appeared, his eyes wide with terror, his mouth open in a silent scream. And then it was replaced by a new reflection, a figure dressed in dark clothes, standing at the edge of the room, watching. The auctioneer smiled, his lips curling into a knowing smirk. "The midnight auction will return," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "And so will you." The mansion's lights dimmed, the shadows stretching across the walls like creeping tendrils. Somewhere, deep within the twisted corridors, a door creaked open, and a faint, echoing laugh resonated through the halls. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this tale. I truly hope you enjoyed the story and felt fully immersed in its world. If you did, please hit that like button, turn on notifications, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future stories filled with adventure, suspense, and mystery. And if you want more thrilling tales right now, click the video link at the top of your screen. The shadows hold many more tales. Don't miss the next one, subscribe and join me for the next dark adventure.